The Steam Deck might be the most famous handheld PC gaming option on the market, but it's certainly not the only one. The Ayaneo 2S is Ayaneo's answer to the audience feedback they received on the original Ayaneo 2, and it offers a whole suite of features that its biggest competitor doesn't. But are those extra features worth the hefty $1,200 price tag? I'm William Worrell with MakeUseOf.com, and today we're taking a look at the Ayaneo 2S handheld gaming PC.
The Ayaneo 2S is a slight hardware revision of the original Ayaneo 2, and like its bigger brother, it's a Windows 11 based handheld gaming PC. The 2S also features a 7-inch 1080p touchscreen, an AMD Ryzen 7 7840U accelerated processing unit with AMD Radeon 780M graphics power, and a 13,050 mAh battery. On top of that, Ayaneo has gone to a lot of effort to increase the comfortability and heat dissipation of the unit to help combat some of the feedback they received from the original model. That same note is also why they've got these fancy analog triggers, and why it's much easier to take this model apart and fix it yourself compared with the last one. Other important features of note include the 2TB SSD that this thing is packing, the expandable storage if that's just not enough for you, and the new redesign of Ayaneo's built-in software, Ayaspace 2. In terms of size, the 2S is surprisingly similar to the Nintendo Switch, though obviously considerably bulkier. This is a nice surprise as it actually makes it considerably smaller and easier to handle than its biggest competitor, the Steam Deck. Of course, that's probably mostly to do with the lack of the additional trackpads, but it's still nice to know for anyone who is looking for a less bulky handheld gaming PC option. The system also packs some pretty high quality controls into the unit, with some nice responsive face buttons and these backlit analog sticks that work both as well as emulating a mouse as it does when you're playing video games. That said, the mouse emulation, which is tied to Ayaneo's proprietary app, doesn't work too great for playing games with. Steam's own controller mapping layer gets in the way and prevents it from working properly, but it has at least shown itself to be working on non-Steam games like DOS games installed via GOG. If you do decide to play some non-controller based games, then you're probably going to have a hard time unless it's a very specific style of game. You'll really start to feel the lack of those trackpads from the Steam Deck when you're trying to map a strategy title, but it works fine for point and clicks and games like that, thanks to the inclusion of the touchscreen. All of that aside, the worst case scenario includes simply plugging a physical mouse or using a Bluetooth mouse into the device whenever you want to play StarCraft, so it's not all that bad, frankly. As you might expect from a slick-looking consumer device like this, Ayaneo's aforementioned built-in software is intended to take the place of the system UI, automatically booting when you first turn the device on. On the slightly less smooth side, occasionally after an update, Ayaspace changes the default language to Chinese, and you have to wade through the menus completely in the dark to change it back. Once you've worked around this problem, the UI replacement itself is fine, if a little fiddly to get working. You can technically attach any account you want to it and sync your game's library directly to Ayaspace, but even after attaching your accounts, you'll still need to install the various game storefronts and log your accounts in to access anything. At the very least, the Ayaspace UI does offer a decent way to launch games that you've already got installed on the device. It also does include a few bonus features, such as these 2 extra programmable buttons on the top, and a pretty well done mouse emulation system that works via the left stick. All of that aside, it's also worth noting that you do basically have a full Windows 11 desktop PC on your hands, so you can just elect to use the built-in operating system directly, and why wouldn't you? In fact, with the right HDMI cable and USB adapters, you can literally just use it like a full Windows 11 desktop, installing pretty much all of the same software and having pretty much the exact same user experience, for better or for worse. It's pretty responsive and effectively means you can carry your desktop PC around with you without the backache that would normally entail. Installing games and changing settings works equally well with a mouse attached, or by just using the built-in touchscreen and the control stick. Partially thanks to Windows 11 being built with touchscreens in mind, and partially thanks to Ayaneo's superlative job on the mouse emulation feature. You also do have plenty of options for control over various device features, like the RGB under the control sticks, or the minutiae of the controller mapping and the settings, but the overall clunkiness of the UI software and the strange quirks do make it a bit of a pain to use when you could just use the more tried and tested Windows UI instead. Easily one of the most important aspects of any PC, handheld or otherwise, is how well it performs. There's no point in buying a gaming system that can't play the games you want to play, after all. In terms of raw performance, the Ayaneo 2S is a pretty full-on machine. It has so far run pretty much anything I could think of throwing at it, either as well or better than I expected. You get decent frame rates out of Modern Warfare 2 if you're good enough to play it without getting cursed out by 12-year-olds, with the recommended settings pumping out around 60 to 75 FPS whether you're in single player or online. Even in incredibly power-hungry games like Dying Light 2 can be played with a consistent 30 FPS on low settings, though you will experience some lag spikes if you're playing without the device plugged in and the battery gets a bit low. A lot of our results are based on the default balanced power plan that you can change in Airspace 2. This caps the system at 15 watts of usage and caps your performance right along with it. You can elect to raise the power cap on the system, and performance raises accordingly, though in most games you'll squeeze at most an extra 10 to 15 frames per second out of it if you're lucky. This also has had the nasty side effect of making the top right hand part of the screen get insanely hot, making it almost impossible to actually keep your hand close to that point, which is annoying since it's so close to where the right thumbstick is. Honestly, most of the time you don't have much reason to play on the more powerful settings. On the default power plan, I've not been able to find a single game that was not in a playable state, with the one exception to that being my copy of The Sims 3, and I'm 99% sure that was Windows 11 more than Ayaneo at fault. Although, with the premium price, the fact that you can't use the most powerful mode without making the device unbearably hot is probably going to be a bit of a turn-off for some people.
While our performance results are pretty impressive, we did eventually find some issues with installing certain games, mostly related to the 780M graphics on this thing not having proper adrenaline driver support yet. And it is very specific. It's games like Star Wars Jedi Survivor that will give you stick, and honestly may not even run at all, depending on how lucky you are. But it just feels kind of a bit weird that we're still waiting on adrenaline drivers for a chip that has been commercially available for at least a month and a half, if not longer, by the time you're seeing this.
All things told, the Ayaneo 2S has comparable battery to a Steam Deck when it's running on the balanced power mode. You can get a good 2 to 3 hours of gaming on it while running something pretty intensive. For instance, after an afternoon of running around a shipment 24/7 on Modern Warfare 2, I checked the battery and found I still had plenty of time to plug it in before the system would shut down automatically. In terms of actual straight-up benchmarking, the use of various power modes obviously does have an effect on the overall score that you're likely to get. In balanced mode, you'll get decent scores on 3D Mark that put it at least a little bit ahead of the Steam Deck. In powered mode, that does jump up even further, but as we said previously, it's probably for the best that you don't use that mode too often, unless you enjoy having your hands be on fire. We ran it through 3D Mark's Time Spy benchmark and got pretty good results. We got a graphics score of 2,225, a CPU score of 6,443, and an overall score of 2,467. This is considerably higher than the Steam Deck's 1,578 graphics, 3,581 CPU, and 1,722 overall score on the same benchmarking test, though presumably that will either have been achieved through a wrapper or a non-standard operating system installation. We also ran it through PC Mark 10 Professional Edition's performance benchmark and achieved some good results there as well. The overall score came out at around 5,000, with Essentials clocking in at 8,344, Productivity at 6,427, and Digital Content Creation at 6,133. Those are productivity performance scores on par with a PC running a mid-range 11th gen Intel processor and a 20 series RTX card, which isn't too bad for a handheld device mainly aimed at playing video games. While it's obvious that the primary function of the Ayaneo 2S is as a gaming machine, it's also worth looking at it for some of the extra things it can do. When it comes to doing non-gaming operations on the 2S, it works as well as you might expect. You can obviously get photo editing done on this thing with relative ease, and the same mostly goes for video editing. I edited together a short video using DaVinci Resolve, and the process was as smooth as it would have been on my desktop or laptop video editing stations. You can also get work done on here if you want, but obviously all this non-gaming software is going to rely on having a mouse and keyboard to hand to be viable choices. When you think about it, this is mostly a gaming device, and its controls and features do reflect this, but at the very least with a decent setup, you can have an almost instantaneous drop-in and drop-out desktop PC situation going. Overall, the Ayaneo 2S does a lot of the jobs it set out to do. It provides incredible handheld performance, allows you easy access to the internals, and has had better heat dissipation than the last unit. That said, it will also melt a hole through your hands if you try to play it on the more power-intensive modes. The clunky AS-based software isn't really helping anyone, despite the few decent features it provides, but at the end of the day, this is still a handheld gaming PC that has the power of a decent desktop. If you're looking for a full-on solution, then this might actually be worth considering sinking the extra money for, though bear in mind you will be paying around $1,200 for the privilege versus $650 for even the most expensive Steam Deck on the market. It's down to you whether that extra money is worth having slightly higher performance, Windows 11 installed by default, and the gamer's best friend, RGB lighting.
Thanks for watching our review, and a big thanks to Ayaneo for sending us the 2S to take a look at. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like to help it grow, and subscribe to see even more of our tech-related articles and reviews coming into your YouTube inbox every time we post them. If you're looking for even more tech-related content, then check out the links in the description of this video to go to our website, where we have hundreds of articles to make technology easier to understand for everyone.